shattered mirrors of injustice. In a bustling modern city where glass towers gleamed like sentinels of progress and busy streets pulsed with ambition and innovation, there lived a woman whose life was marked by quiet dignity and a persistent struggle for recognition. Her name was Maribel Santos, a middle-aged domestic worker whose warm brown skin told stories of her heritage and whose eyes reflected a complex blend of sorrow and hope, wreathed in silent resilience. Despite the shadow cast by her laborious existence, Maribel embodied an unyielding strength resonating within her, silently defying the constraints imposed by society. Each day she traversed the polished hallways of the affluent households that employed her, her presence as constant as the sunrise yet tragically overlooked. To the families she served, she was simply a fixture, a reliable source of cleanliness and comfort, rendered invisible by their privilege. In these homes filled with art and elegance, she moved gracefully, dusting shelves adorned with the accolades of others, while her own dreams lay undisturbed, much like the dust she swept aside. Yet beneath her composed exterior, every chore was a poignant reminder of the intricate tapestry of class and race that bound her to a history of labor, an often unacknowledged reality that had significantly shaped her identity. Maribel had spent nearly 2 decades navigating the intricate labyrinth of households that prided themselves on their outward liberalism, a facade that often masked an undercurrent of discomfort and contradiction. Beneath the polished veneer of modernity, where equality was hailed as a virtue, her reality was tinted with deep-seated unease. The progressive values proclaimed by her employers often felt like a carefully crafted performance, accompanied by whispered comments about race that subtly undermined her contributions, casting long shadows over her efforts. Despite her unwavering dedication, lingering reminders of racial bias gauged her worth, revealing a troubling truth about the society she served. In every gentle gesture and kind word she extended toward her employers, there lay an unyielding resilience, a powerful testament to her spirit forged in the crucible of years, spent enduring not just the challenges of her position, but also the insidious judgments that accompanied it. Each day, she donned the armor of professionalism, even as her heart bore the weight of silent battles waged behind closed doors. For Maribel, her identity was an elaborate tapestry woven from the threads of community and isolation, a bittersweet duality that profoundly informed her existence. In moments of quiet reflection, she often grappled with the question of belonging, yearning for acceptance while wrestling with the constant reminder of her otherness. One sweltering summer afternoon, in a lavish apartment complex nestled in the heart of the metropolis, Maribel found herself entangled in a scandal that had long lurked beneath the shimmering surface of high society. It began with murmurs of suspicion, a misplaced vase, an unopened jewelry box, and a series of small, inexplicable shortages that accumulated over days and weeks, signifying something far more troubling than mere accidents. The object of these suspicions, however, was Maribel herself, a poignant reflection of society's quickness to assume guilt. As the days passed, whispers grew into pointed fingers, and Maribel could feel the weight of their gazes even through her elegant veneer. She pondered each incident, the shifting relationships among her neighbors, and the secrets obscured by their polite smiles. The community, once a haven of camaraderie, morphed into a treacherous minefield where trust had become a rare commodity. Each time she entered the lobby or passed by the rooftop garden, hushed conversations would cease, leaving her in a bubble of awkward silence. Her attempts to defend herself only deepened the chasm, transforming her every word into twisted confessions of guilt. Even her closest friend Celeste began to distance herself. The warmth in their laughter melted away, replaced by an icy tension. Maribel longed to confront those gathered in little clusters, to demand clarity and resolution, but fear held her back. She acutely understood that pride and reputation were fragile, easily shattered by reckless whispers. Then one evening, while returning from a weekend excursion intended to clear her mind, Maribel stumbled upon a chilling discovery. In the basement, hidden behind an unassuming pile of cardboard boxes, she found a trove of stolen items. The glitter of her neighbor's missing trinkets sparkled defiantly in the dim light, mocking her. This was a puzzle piece that completed the growing portrait of betrayal sketched in her mind. The realization sent a shiver down her spine. She had been the scapegoat, the unsuspecting pawn sacrificed in a game she could hardly comprehend. Determined to reclaim her sense of justice and prove her innocence, Maribel devised a meticulous plan. She would gather evidence to expose the true culprit, who had so deftly woven a web of deceit around her. As she began connecting the dots and reaching out to other residents who had experienced similar losses, unsettling clues pointed back to a select group of longtime residents, seemingly above reproach. This was not merely a network of thieves. It was a well-disguised cabal operating under layers of charm and affluence, cleverly masking their misdeeds behind the polished surface of high society. With a new fire lit beneath her, Maribel spent late nights researching and planning her approach. She knew the road ahead would be fraught with peril, as challenging a group so entrenched in their power would not be without consequences. Yet the thought of allowing her name to remain sullied by their treachery was unbearable. More than the theft of material possessions, it was the theft of her dignity that fueled her determination. As the summer sun dipped below the horizon, casting golden hues across the sprawling skyline, Maribel felt a profound sense of resolve settle within her. She was no longer merely a target of scandal. She was a woman reclaiming agency in a world that had sought to silence her. The next few days would require an intricate blend of strategy, courage, and potentially unexpected alliances. But one thing was clear. She would not let whispers define her, nor would she allow their deception to go unchallenged. With hope and fury intertwined, her fight for justice was just beginning. Rumors spread among the staff and trickled through the corridors of the apartment like a virulent virus. A family that prided itself on its stature and achievements could not fathom that one of its trusted hands would betray them. And so, under the spotlight of disgrace, Maribel became a convenient scapegoat for the household's misdirected anger. It wasn't that she had ever harbored ill intent or taken advantage of her position. Rather, in a society marred by deep-seated racial and class divisions, her very presence aroused unwarranted suspicion. As whispers intensified, Maribel found herself increasingly isolated. Each passing day brought a new wave of cold shoulders and avoided glances, the weight of unspoken accusations hanging heavily in the air. The family that once viewed her as a trusted confidant now scrutinized her every action, interpreting her slightest misstep as further evidence of treachery. Amidst the turmoil, a small flicker of defiance ignited within her. Determined to clear her name and restore her dignity, Maribel began to seek out the truth behind the scandals that enveloped the household. She quickly realized that the rumors were not merely the products of imagination. They were cleverly woven fabrications stemming from long-standing grievances buried deep within the family dynamics. Through quiet observation, she identified the instigator, Raphael, the ambitious nephew of the patriarch, who had long felt overshadowed by Maribel's established loyalty and competence. Jealousy had festered, growing into a malignant need to sabotage her for his own gain, all while preserving his image as the favored heir. Maribel's resolve solidified as she made the decision to confront him, understanding that the only way to reclaim her space in this world was to expose the truth. Late one evening, when the household was cloaked in shadows, she slipped into the drawing room, where Raphael often plotted late into the night. Heart-pounding, she confronted him, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her veins. "You think your schemes will go unseen?" she challenged, meeting his gaze with an unyielding stare. "You are not as clever as you believe." Raphael, taken aback, momentarily faltered, but quickly masked his shock with a sneer. "And what will you do about it? Who will believe you over me?" "Perhaps they will listen to the truth," Maribel replied, her resolve now crystallized. "And I will ensure they do." With each word, she felt the chains of shame begin to loosen. Maribel knew the risk of her action. If she failed, there would be no escape from the spirals of disgrace that Raphael had crafted. But in that moment, she understood the power of reclaiming her narrative. She left the room with a plan, ready to gather allies among the other staff, who had also felt the sting of Raphael's disdain. Gathering for secret meetings, they whispered their grievances and shared their stories, a tapestry of truth unfolding against the backdrop of deceit. Each voice added strength to the chorus, igniting a newfound courage in Maribel, who believed in the collective power of their resolve. Together, they prepared to unveil the truth and dismantle the web of lies that Raphael had spun, not only for Maribel's sake, but for every voice that had been muffled by privilege and power. As the day of confrontation approached, the air crackled with anticipation. In the grand hall of the estate, Maribel stood at the center of a brewing storm, ready to confront Raphael and the household with their truth. She felt the weight of her ancestors behind her, propelling her forward as the whispers of the past blended seamlessly with the hopes of the present. The time for silence had come to an end, and in this pivotal moment, Maribel knew she was no longer just a scapegoat. She was the harbinger of change. Sonanawariliin Saman Mate. The accusations came swiftly and with an air of finality, each word like a blow that resonated through the very walls of her life. A private investigator, a shadowy figure cloaked in suspicion and mystery, was quietly hired by the family to unearth hidden truths and fabricate narratives. Dispatched with a singular purpose, he employed methods that were intrusive and unsparing, violating the sanctity of Maribel's existence. He shadowed her every move, lurking in corners, capturing her mundane routines on film, moments that held no malice but were stripped of context by his probing lens. Every time she swept the floors or carefully polished a silver tray, his eyes betrayed an assumption born of deep-seated prejudice, turning her ordinary dignity into a spectacle of judgment. Yet Maribel remained blissfully unaware of the secretive surveillance that had entered her life like an uninvited guest. The atmosphere in the household, once a haven of warmth and laughter, had forever shifted, warped by the sinister cloud of suspicion that loomed overhead. Conversations that once flowed easily turned curt and cryptic, every word now weighted with unspoken accusations. Smiles that had once lit up the room faded into tight-lipped grimaces, each gesture now awkwardly measured, as if bearing the burden of distrust. Her family, once the defenders of her spirit, had become unwitting accomplices in a play that cast her as the lead villain, gnawing away at her sense of belonging. In this chilling new reality, Maribel felt the walls of her sanctuary closing in, echoing the haunting refrain of betrayal. She could almost sense the collective gaze of her family, the scrutiny piercing through the air like daggers, leaving her questioning not just her innocence, but her very place within the tapestry of their lives. As the days blended into weeks, Maribel's resolve began to weaken under the strain of solitude and despair. Each time she entered the living room, she half expected to find the investigator's gaze lurking in the shadows. But her family's true betrayal felt far more profound. They were the real watchers now, the real jury, scrutinizing her every word and action like cryptic evidence in a case already decided. She attempted to engage them with her usual wit and warmth, but the effort felt like dancing on glass shards, every attempt threatening to cut deeper into her already raw nerves. In quiet moments, she searched for validation from reflection, standing before the mirror adorned with family photographs that now felt like an alien gallery of false memories. She could almost hear the echoes of laughter trapped within the frames, mocking her desperate grasp for the past. The proud face of her father, the gentle smile of her mother, and the carefree innocence of her younger brother, all belonging to a world that no longer recognized her. Each photograph whispered eerie secrets, shadows shifting within the frames as if they conspired against her, erasing the love they once shared. Meanwhile, the investigator delved deeper into Maribel's life, his reports detailing not just her mundane activities, but also combing through her relationships, insisting on finding inconsistencies. He painted a distorted portrait of her existence, portraying a woman harboring secrets and suggesting illicit encounters concealed beneath layers of domestic normalcy. What he uncovered was a lifetime of silent struggles she had endured, her deferred dreams, quiet battles with depression, and the challenges of caring for aging parents. And he twisted her vulnerabilities into a narrative suited for the harshest of judgments. Unbeknownst to Maribel, her family convened to sift through the investigator's findings, a council shrouded in stigma and dread. They debated incessantly, armed with preconceived notions and scraps of half-truths presented as fact. They believed the investigator's reports held the key to unraveling the truth behind Maribel's character, as if that truth could somehow reconcile their fears and insecurities. Yet as they turned on her, it was not the veneer of love that shielded them, but a tightening circle of accusation that threatened to suffocate her. In her solitude, Maribel clung to the remnants of her spirit, seeking solace in the art of painting. Each stroke of color became a cathartic release, a way to reconstruct her shattered narrative on canvas. The vibrant hues swirled around visions of joy and sorrow, each piece a reflection of her truth, a patchwork shield against the looming shadows of doubt. Through her paintings, she poured out her heart, desperately hoping that one day somebody might see beyond the colors and decipher the story she yearned to tell. Then came the fateful evening when Maribel found herself alone, contemplating the abstraction she had been meticulously crafting. The weight of her family's accusations pressed down like a physical force, threatening to crush her under its enormity. But amid the turmoil, an epiphany sparked. Rather than waiting for validation, she would confront her family, face the murky waters of mistrust head-on, and reclaim her narrative from the twisted hands of those who dared to define her. Determined, she gathered her courage, wiping the tears that were threatening to spill over. Tomorrow would bring frank conversations and raw honesty. She'd show them the truth, not the fabricated version conjured from the depths of skepticism. It was time for Maribel to embrace her identity, to fight back against the suffocating silence, and reclaim the life that had unwittingly turned into a battleground. Maribel's heart ached with the familiar sting of unfair judgment, a relentless reminder of the obstacles she had faced throughout her life. The memories of her childhood in a small, windswept village flooded her mind, a place where the earth was but a patchwork of hardships sewn together by the sacrifices of those who toiled upon it. In that humble setting, where the sun seldom shone upon dreams, she learned an invaluable lesson at an early age. Dignity was not a gift, but something that had to be fiercely defended against every form of injustice and inequality that threatened to engulf her. The laughter of her peers was often drowned out by whispers of scorn and prejudice, yet it was in that crucible of poverty and struggle that she unearthed a fierce inner strength, an unyielding resolve that she had cultivated like a seed blooming in the crevices of a rocky landscape. This inner resilience, once hidden beneath layers of fear and doubt, now surged forth with renewed vigor, ready to be summoned in her battle against the humiliation and systemic racism that sought to define her existence. As she steeled herself for the upcoming confrontation, Maribel felt the weight of her past fortifying her spirit, transforming her vulnerability into a powerful weapon against the societal constraints that had long sought to suppress her voice. With each passing day, Maribel found herself standing a little taller, each stride echoing the countless stories of her ancestors who had persevered against all odds. She recalled her grandmother, a woman whose hands were weathered and worn from years spent laboring in the fields, yet whose spirit remained unbroken. Her grandma had instilled in her the belief that their history was a tapestry rich with resilience, and that their lineage was not defined by the lack of means, but by the wealth of spirit and resolve passed down through generations. The memory of her grandmother's wise words, "We are the storm, not the land that it ravages," resonated deeply within her as she prepared to confront those who deemed her unworthy. Maribel stepped out into the world, her determination igniting like a flame inside her. The high school courtyard, where she had often felt like a mere shadow, now appeared as a stage upon which she would reclaim her narrative. She gathered her peers, those whose voices had often been silenced alongside her own, and began organizing a rally to address the injustices they had all faced. It felt liberating to unite under a common cause, her courage becoming a beacon for others. As the day of the rally approached, Maribel spent sleepless nights crafting speeches and organizing her thoughts. She pored over every word, honing her message until it was a clear reflection of her lived experiences, an outcry against the despair that had lingered too long in their community. She wanted to ensure her message resonated not just with those who looked like her, but with everyone willing to listen. Maribel's desire was to create a bridge, encouraging understanding and compassion rather than a divide. On the day of the rally, the atmosphere buzzed with anticipation. Students from various backgrounds filed into the courtyard, some carrying handmade signs adorned with powerful slogans, while others wore expressions of cautious hope. Maribel took a deep breath, standing under the vivid sky, feeling the warmth of the sun kiss her skin. It was a stark contrast to the chilling embrace of prejudice she had fought all her life. She took the microphone, her heart pounding in rhythm with the rising tide of adrenaline. As she began to speak, her voice initially trembled, hesitant but growing stronger with each phrase she uttered. She shared her story and those of countless others who had experienced the harsh realities of a biased world. There were moments of silence where her words lingered in the air, causing her audience to reflect deeply on the weight of her message. At that moment, Maribel was no longer just one person fighting against systemic racism. She was the voice of a multitude, a representative of change. The rally morphed into a celebration of solidarity, a symbol of defiance against a society that too often turned a blind eye to injustice. Students rallied together, sharing their own stories of struggle, and in that exchange, healing began to take root. Maribel realized that the walls built by judgment were not insurmountable. They could be dismantled, brick by brick, through collective empathy and action. In the weeks that followed, Maribel looked upon her village with renewed eyes. Each face she encountered was now a reminder of the community she cherished and the power they held when they stood together. She remained committed to her mission, tirelessly advocating for equality and justice within her school and beyond. Each battle won, no matter how small, was a victory not just for her, but for every soul that had ever felt the sting of exclusion. Maribel understood then that dignity was not merely a shield to fend off negativity, it was a light illuminating paths for others lost in shadows. She would carry that torch forward, igniting minds and hearts, armed with a resilient spirit that would never back down against the forces of injustice. The journey ahead would undoubtedly present more challenges, yet she was undeterred. With her community beside her, she would rise to meet them fiercely. The day the accusations came to a head was etched into memory by a profound irony that seemed to permeate the very air. On an otherwise ordinary morning, when the soft light of dawn spilled into the kitchen and dust motes danced lazily in the beams, Maribel was busily preparing the breakfast table. She hummed a soft tune, a melody that echoed the warmth of her childhood, evoking a past both tender and painful, filled with echoes of laughter and the comforting embrace of family. Yet beneath her calm exterior lurked the shadows of unspoken fears and unresolved tensions. Suddenly, the harmony of her routine was shattered as the master of the house, Mr. Gregory Hamilton, strode into the room with a commanding presence. A man of considerable stature, whose eyes were unaccustomed to questioning even his own conscience, he bore the weight of his privileged life with an unsettling arrogance. Abruptly, he demanded to know the whereabouts of a missing brooch, an heirloom he prized above all possessions, a sparkling token of wealth and status that held both sentimental and financial value. The exquisite piece, embellished with intricate designs and a glimmering gemstone at its center, had been passed down through generations, and its loss signified not just a personal setback for Mr. Hamilton, but an affront to his entire legacy. His tone was incredulous, a mix of disbelief and barely concealed anger as he looked at Maribel as if she were a suspect in a grave crime. The atmosphere turned thick with tension. Each word hung heavy in the air, pregnant with accusation. Maribel, taken aback but resolute, felt a surge of defiance rise within her. She straightened her posture, her heart racing, yet she maintained a measured calm in her reply. "Sir, I have not, and I am certain it was in its place when I finished cleaning." Her voice held a quiet strength, one that stood in stark contrast to the volatility of the moment, and she braced herself for the storm that was surely about to follow. "Maribel, have you seen my mother's brooch?" he demanded, his voice echoing through the high-ceiling foyer. "I believe it was here just yesterday." "I haven't, David," Maribel replied, her brow furrowing as she stepped cautiously into the foyer, the light catching her worried expression. "Have you checked the study? You know how your mother loves to misplace her things when she's been working?" David ran a hand through his hair, frustration bubbling beneath the surface. "It's not in the study. I looked everywhere. She'll be devastated if she can't find it before the gala tonight." Maribel bit her lip, glancing toward the ornate staircase that spiraled up toward the darkened upper levels of the house. "What about the last time you saw her wearing it? She wore it at dinner last week. Perhaps we should retrace her steps." He crossed his arms and sighed, his heartbeat quickening as the memory replayed in his mind. "You're right. Was her Miss Simonon? Maybe she took it off in the garden. Let's go check." As they stepped outside, the evening air was cool and infused with the scent of blooming jasmine, yet an unease settled thickly around them. "What if she doesn't remember where she put it?" David mused, worry gnawing at him. "You know how sentimental she is about that brooch?" Maribel nodded in agreement, watching as he moved with purpose toward the garden gate. "We'll find it. It has to be here somewhere. Besides, she always says that pieces of her past, like this brooch, have a way of showing up when you least expect it." As they searched the well-tended gardens, the sun continued its descent, casting elongated shadows over the hedges. David knelt beside the azalea bushes, rummaging through the foliage. It should have been near the bench. She loved sitting there to admire the roses. Suddenly, a glimmer caught Maribel's eye from the corner of the flower bed. She knelt closer, brushing aside the leaves. "David, over here!" His heart raced as he joined her, hope rekindling within him. There, nestled among the petals, lay his mother's brooch, sparkling against the earthy tones of the garden. "See, I told you it was here." Just as they carefully lifted the brooch, a voice broke through the twilight. "What are you two doing in the garden?" It was David's mother, her eyes narrowing as she drew closer. "And is that my brooch?" Realizing they had been caught, David exchanged a guilty glance with Maribel. "We found it, Mom. It must have slipped off when you were sitting here the other night." Relief flooded her expression as she took the brooch from their hands, her features softening. "I was so worried," she confessed, her voice tinged with gratitude. "Thank you both for finding it. I don't know what I would have done without it for the gala." As the evening sky deepened to indigo, the trio made their way back inside, laughter spilling over the concerns of the day. The brooch was safe, but more importantly, moments like these reminded them of the bonds that held them tightly together, just like the delicate locket that had passed through generations. With the door closed behind them, the scent of vanilla candles mingling with the soft hum of the evening, Sarah suggested they play a game, a nostalgic throwback to their childhood. As they settled into their cozy living room, the flickering light danced off the walls, highlighting framed pictures that grinned down at them. Each frame told a story, just as the locket did, encapsulating moments of joy, laughter, and even sorrow. "Remember that summer by the lake?" Jack chuckled, his eyes twinkling with mischief. "We thought we could catch fish with our bare hands." Ava rolled her eyes, her laughter bubbling over. "We ended up soaked and empty-handed." As they reminisced, a sense of warmth enveloped them, like a cherished blanket pulled from the back of the closet. They played game after game, each competition stirring up friendly banter. But underneath the playful jabs lay deeper conversations about dreams and fears, futures imagined and paths not taken. It was during a quiet moment, while sipping hot cocoa, that Ava spoke up softly. "Do you ever think about how different our lives could have been if we hadn't found each other?" "All the time," Jack replied, gaze drifting toward the window. "There's a certain magic in these connections. I can't imagine facing the world alone." Sarah nodded in agreement, her heart swelling with gratitude. "No matter where life takes us, I know we'll always have this place, this time together." Outside, stars twinkled into the night, reflecting their collective dreams and shared memories. Though there were still challenges ahead, and the world outside was far from perfect, they found strength in their unity, ready to face the uncertainties that lay ahead, armed with memories encapsulated in laughter and love, much like that precious locket resting in its velvet-lined box. Confused, Maribel replied with measured calm, "Sir, I have not, and I am certain it was in its place when I finished cleaning." Her words, though soft, trembled with the gravity of years of unspoken injustice. Yet beyond the immediate cruelty lay a more profound injustice. This was not merely about a missing item. It was the culmination of decades of devaluation, where Maribel had been objectified by her race and her station in life. Every whispered remark and condescending smile had prepared the stage for this accusation. A stark reminder that in a modern society glittering with promises of equality, many souls were still being left behind. Yet beyond the immediate cruelty, there was a more profound injustice. This was not simply about a missing item. It was the culmination of decades of devaluation, where Maribel had been objectified by her race and her station in life. Every whispered remark and every condescending smile had prepared the stage for this accusation. A stark reminder that in a modern society glimmering with promises of equality, many souls were still being left behind. As the investigation unfolded, the narrative found itself driven by a relentless pursuit of truth amid a morass of discrimination. In interviews conducted by the authorities, Maribel spoke with restrained dignity about her years of service, about her personal struggles, and about the small moments of humanity that had sustained her. She recounted the compassion of a stranger who once offered her a warm meal on a cold night, the kindness of a young child who had drawn her a picture to express gratitude, and the solitary moments when she silently vowed that she would not be defined by the color of her skin or the class into which she had been born. In the days that followed, as the city continued its relentless pace, Maribel's story began to spread, first quietly among the cleaning staff of the building, then in hushed tones among neighbors, and eventually reaching activists and community leaders who had long advocated for the rights of workers and minorities. What began as a single claim of theft had ignited a broader discussion about the persistent undercurrents of racism and classism that permeated even the most seemingly enlightened quarters of the urban landscape. Elizabeth Monroe, a young lawyer with a reputation for championing the downtrodden, took a personal interest in Maribel's case. Elizabeth had grown up in the same neighborhoods where whispers of injustice were as common as the laughter of children in narrow markets. With passion and determination, she set out to re-examine the evidence with fresh eyes. She believed that Maribel, with her decades of hard work and undying sense of honor, had become an unwilling casualty of a prejudiced system. As Elizabeth delved deeper into the case files, she uncovered a troubling series of inconsistencies that sent her heart racing. Witness statements contradicting each other, evidence that had seemingly vanished, and a legal representation that had glossed over critical details, all painted a picture of a case doomed by negligence and prejudice, emphasizing the necessity for thorough and vigilant investigations in the face of wrongful accusations. Determined to breathe new life into Maribel's story, Elizabeth reached out to old contacts within the legal system. She knew the public defender assigned to Maribel had rushed through the proceedings, but she was determined to connect with him for any additional insights he might offer. Perhaps he had details he hadn't included in the formal record, details that could shed light on the shadows lurking in the corners of Maribel's past. While waiting for a response, Elizabeth immersed herself in the community. She visited the local congregations, met with activists, and even joined a neighborhood watch meeting where she shared Maribel's plight. Little by little, the community began to rally around her. People who had watched Maribel's spirited activities spoke up about her dedication to helping others, mothering children in the area, organizing food drives, and even offering her home as a refuge for those in need. Meanwhile, an unexpected ally emerged. A seasoned journalist, Greg Thompson, known for exposing corruption and injustices, caught wind of Elizabeth's efforts. Intrigued, he approached her, offering to investigate the background of the case. His experience and resources brought a new layer of credibility to the matter. Together, they planned a strategy that involved reaching out to the media, hoping to apply public pressure to the legal system. As the collaboration intensified, Elizabeth began drafting a petition to reinstate Maribel's hearing, seeking to showcase the mountain of new evidence they were compiling. She held meetings with community leaders, urging them to speak about Maribel's character and contributions, painting her not as a mere defendant, but as a pillar of the community. With each passing day, Elizabeth felt the weight of her mission grow heavier. Yet the support from Maribel's neighbors fueled her resolve. They shared stories around dinner tables and local coffee shops, sparking a movement, one that sought not just justice for Maribel, but a broader examination of systemic failures that allowed such injustices to persist. Finally, the day arrived when the community gathered for a rally outside the courthouse. Elizabeth stood at the forefront, holding a placard adorned with Maribel's face, surrounded by supporters chanting for her freedom. With cameras flashing and reporters taking notes, Elizabeth addressed the crowd, her voice unwavering as she demanded accountability and change. It was more than just a fight for Maribel. It was a stand against a broken system that had long neglected its responsibility to protect the innocent. In that moment, surrounded by the people Maribel had affected, Elizabeth felt an overwhelming sense of purpose expanding within her. She knew that her journey was just beginning, and she was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, fueled by the hope and justice that seemed finally within reach. Elizabeth's investigation revealed disturbing inconsistencies. The family's own records were poorly maintained, and the chain of evidence relied on circumstantial details that conveniently pointed away from any logical culprit. In a series of interviews with household members and fellow domestic workers, it became clear that many of the missing items had been discovered later in the home, hidden behind stacks of unused objects or in forgotten corners. Every piece of evidence used to demonize Maribel was now being reinterpreted as a consequence of a chaotic household, where the privileged few had failed to maintain accountability for their own belongings. Over time, Elizabeth's meticulous work began to reveal layers of discrimination previously obscured by wealth and power. She presented her findings at community meetings and press conferences, compelling the local media to confront the ugly reality that accusations against Maribel were less about actual theft and more about a long-standing culture of dehumanizing prejudice that persisted within their society. Elizabeth's voice, filled with earnest determination, urged her readers and listeners to see beyond the immediate scandal and confront the systemic injustices that allowed racism and classism to thrive. As her audience grappled with the harsh truths laid bare by her research, Elizabeth found herself becoming a reluctant leader in the fight against the very structures that sought to silence marginalized voices. Inspired by the stories she uncovered, she organized community workshops aimed at empowering those affected by discrimination, encouraging them to share their own experiences. Together, they crafted narratives that highlighted the intersecting lives of individuals ensnared in the web of inequality. The workshops flourished, drawing citizens from every corner of the city, igniting a collective desire for justice. Elizabeth noticed a shift. The fear of talking back began to dissolve, replaced by a burgeoning sense of solidarity. Attendees shared their struggles not in whispers, but with a newfound clarity and strength, as if, through the act of speaking, they were reclaiming their narratives. In response to the rising tide of support, Elizabeth decided to launch a grassroots campaign aimed at dismantling the policies that perpetuated discrimination. They initiated petitions to reform the local justice system and demanded transparency in city planning. Elizabeth crafted an online platform where community members could voice their concerns and propose solutions, fostering a dialogue that bridged gaps between the affluent and the disenfranchised. As the campaign gained traction, Elizabeth faced pushback from powerful figures in the city who saw their privileges threatened. They attempted to discredit her by challenging her credibility, but the community stood firm. Elizabeth's resolve only strengthened, galvanizing allies who were previously silent. An array of local activists, artists, and business owners began to amplify her message, using social media to create a viral response that transcended geographical boundaries. One particularly poignant moment emerged when Elizabeth's team organized a public march, inviting citizens to wear symbolic colors representing various struggles against oppression. The streets, once marked by slow-moving traffic and indifference, transformed into a vibrant display of unity. People from different backgrounds walked side by side, united in their calls for equity and inclusion. As the movement grew, Elizabeth began to collaborate with local universities to develop educational programs that scrutinized racism and classism through a critical lens, teaching students about the history of their community and the systemic barriers that perpetuated existing disparities. Recognizing education as a vital tool, she aimed to equip the next generation with the knowledge and awareness necessary to champion enduring change. As the movement grew, Elizabeth began collaborating with local universities to develop educational programs that addressed racism and classism through a critical lens, teaching students about the history of their community and the systemic barriers that perpetuated existing disparities. She recognized education as a vital tool, equipping the next generation with the knowledge and awareness necessary to foster enduring change. The summer turned to autumn, and with it came the promise of tangible reform. Local governments started to take notice, and legislative discussions opened doors for potential policies aimed at increasing accountability in law enforcement and local businesses. Elizabeth and her team monitored these developments closely, preparing to leverage public support at every opportunity. As Elizabeth looked around during those moments of triumph, she felt a profound sense of hope. The journey was far from over. She knew that dismantling age-old injustices would take time, effort, and unwavering resolve. Yet the determination of her community, the very people she sought to uplift, ignited a fire within her, a promise to continue fighting until every voice was heard, every life valued. And in that shared purpose, they began to envision a future free from the chains of prejudice, a vision worth pursuing together. Despite the mounting evidence in her favor, Maribel continued to endure the isolating effects of suspicion. She was confined not only by the walls of the household that once provided her modest livelihood, but also by the walls of society's collective memory, a memory that tended to forget the quiet sacrifices of those whose voices were often unheard. In her modest room on the upper floor of the apartment complex, framed by a small window that offered a glimpse of the city's tumultuous skyline, Maribel often stared into space and recalled childhood days when dreams were bigger than circumstance. She remembered a time when hope was abundant and when stories of triumph over adversity were told around humble dinner tables. As she sat there, The echoes of laughter from those happy times danced faintly in her mind, mingling with the oppressive silence of her current reality. Each breath she took seemed heavier, laden with unexpressed fears and unacknowledged dreams. She wished she could break free from the shackles of judgment, to reclaim her narrative and rewrite the script written for her by others who had never walked in her shoes. The irony of it all gnawed at her. She had worked tirelessly to lift others, yet found herself trapped by the very system she had hoped to uplift. With each passing day, the walls seemed to close in further, and Maribel's spirit wavered. Yet in that moment of despair, a flicker of determination ignited within her. She resolved to reclaim her narrative, to transform the suspicion into a catalyst for change. There had been countless other voices suppressed, stories just like hers waiting to be told. It was time to gather those threads to weave a tapestry of resilience and defiance. Drawing from her well of experiences, she began to pen her thoughts, capturing moments of clarity and inspiration that glimmered like stars against the dark sky of judgment. Every word she wrote was an act of rebellion. The stories of the unsung, the tales of struggle and perseverance began to flow through her fingertips, spilling onto the pages like ink shedding secrets. She included the tales of her neighbors, an elderly man who had lost everything but still shared his meals with the less fortunate, a single mother juggling multiple jobs to provide for her children, and a young girl whose laughter could light up even the bleakest of days. Each narrative resonated with her own. Together they formed a chorus of hope amid the clamor of doubt. But Maribel knew that finding her own voice was only half the battle. She needed to be heard. Drawing from her determination, she reached out to community organizations, local artists, and fellow writers, inviting them to join her in this storytelling movement. "Let's shine a light where there's darkness," she encouraged in her emails, each word infused with the fervor of her purpose. Slowly but surely, a network began to form, each person bringing their unique story, each edition making the tapestry even more vibrant. As the project gained momentum, Maribel's own experience transformed. No longer was she merely a victim of circumstance, she became a beacon for others, and in this newfound role, she discovered a sense of belonging she had long craved. It was as if each shared story dismantled the walls of her isolation, brick by brick. The project culminated in a small community exhibition, showcasing their collective stories through art, poetry, and multimedia. And as she stood in that space, surrounded by faces illuminated with pride and recognition, Maribel understood that she had not only found her own voice, but had also given life to the voices of many. The power of shared narratives was a force stronger than any societal stigma. Through this journey, Maribel realized the importance of not just remembering the past, but actively participating in the creation of the future. It became clear to her that collective memory wasn't just a burden, it was a legacy she could take charge of. As the city gleamed through her window that evening, she felt a renewed sense of hope. Her dreams no longer seemed stranded in the distance, but were rather an integral part of the vibrant future. She was now an active participant in helping to shape. It was during one of these quiet afternoons that Maribel resolved to speak her truth, despite the punishment that might come. With trembling hands, she sat down to write an account of her life. Not a litany of grievances, but a chronicle of compassion, perseverance, and the simple belief in fairness. In her writing, she remembered the countless times her employers had taken her kindness for granted, the moments when her efforts were overshadowed by assumptions of deceit, and the unwavering support of those rare souls who saw beyond her skin color and social standing. She wrote about the days when the sun seemed to shine only for her, illuminating her path through a world that often lingered in shadow. Each chapter of her life unfolded like the petals of a flower, some vibrant and beautiful, others wilted and bruised. Maribel poured out her soul, recounting tales of her childhood dreams and the friends who believed in her even when she faltered. She had learned to rise from the ashes of rejection, finding strength in the whispers of encouragement that echoed in her heart. As she penned the intricate details, memories surged like waves, refreshing her spirit while simultaneously weighing her down. The times she had to smile through clenched teeth during degrading encounters, reminding herself that poise was more powerful than rage. The passion she felt for her community bloomed in her words, urging her to advocate for those who felt invisible, who harbored the same fears and dreams she did. In the midst of her struggles, she found solace among the elderly in her neighborhood, gathering their stories like precious gems and weaving them into her own narrative of resilience. Maribel envisioned this account reaching not only those who shared her journey, but also those who might learn from it. With each stroke of her pen, she recognized the power her truth held, the possibility of resonating across divides, fostering understanding, and nurturing a sense of shared humanity. While her hands shook with the weight of her revelations, her heart swelled with hope, knowing that perhaps this truth could spark change. It could inspire others to embrace their own stories, creating a chorus that demanded to be heard, a collective anthem of strength and resilience. Finally, with ink still wet on the final pages, she paused to breathe deeply, letting the realization sink in that she had not just written about her life, she had forged a weapon against complacency, a shield for the vulnerable. In that moment, she understood that to speak her truth was to embrace the essence of her existence, a brilliant tapestry woven with threads of love, endurance, and above all, unyielding hope. Her words, imbued with raw emotion and unvarnished truth, eventually reached a wider audience far beyond her immediate circle. A local columnist, deeply moved by the resonances between Maribel's personal narrative and the broader struggles of marginalized workers in society, decided to delve into her story. This journalist penned a powerful piece that detailed not only Maribel's fight for justice, but also highlighted the systemic injustices that many face in silence. Published in a widely read newspaper, the article was aptly titled "The Unheard Voice of Justice." Instantly, it sparked intense public debate, igniting conversations that traversed socioeconomic barriers. Readers from various backgrounds, from blue-collar laborers to academics, found themselves captivated by Maribel's story, a narrative that echoed their own struggles and the silent battles they fought on a daily basis. Social media erupted in a digital whirlwind of discussions about equity and the dignity inherent in labor, reflecting a collective awakening to the urgency of the issues at hand. Hashtags like Justice for Maribel and Voices of the Marginalized trended as individuals shared their own experiences of discrimination while calling for accountability and change. In classrooms, workplaces, and community gatherings, dialogues emerged, questioning the entrenched systems that allowed prejudice to flourish unchecked. The article not only shed light on Maribel's plight, but also catalyzed a movement, uniting voices across the spectrum in an anthem for justice and a plea for societal transformation. In the midst of this growing public pressure, the authorities found themselves compelled to reopen the case against Maribel, which had long been buried under layers of injustice. A remarkable shift in public sentiment, fueled by relentless advocacy and the courage of those who stood beside her, prompted a comprehensive reassessment of the evidence that had led to her wrongful conviction. As part of this renewed effort, a judicial commission composed of progressive-minded judges, legal experts, and community representatives was convened, reflecting a diverse cross-section of the society that demanded accountability. The commission was tasked with meticulously reviewing every piece of evidence, every recorded statement, and every minute detail of the investigation that had initially painted Maribel as the sole perpetrator. For weeks, the commission met in a sterile courtroom that paradoxically buzzed with the palpable energy of a community yearning for justice. The air was thick with anticipation and hope. Each session became a gathering place for supporters, advocates, and families who had also suffered under similar burdens of systemic bias. Witnesses were invited to share their truths, emboldened by the belief that their voices would finally resonate where they once fell silent. In this environment, the quest for truth transformed into a powerful movement, one that sought not only to exonerate Maribel, but also to dismantle the architectural foundations of prejudice and racism that had stood for far too long. During the hearings, testimony after testimony began to unravel the carefully constructed narrative of guilt that had been so confidently imposed upon Maribel. It was as if a collective veil had been lifted, revealing a complex tapestry of misunderstandings, biases, and unspoken truths. Neighbors, initially hesitant but buoyed by a newfound sense of justice, stepped forward with accounts of seeing other individuals loitering in the vicinity of the apartment complex around the time the items disappeared. Their voices, once muffled by fear of retribution or social ostracism, now rang with clarity and determination. Furthermore, former employees of the household shared pivotal insights into the chaotic environment that had surrounded Maribel. They recounted patterns of mismanagement characterized by neglect, and a troubling failure to secure valuable possessions, painting a picture of a household rife with disarray. One particularly striking piece of evidence emerged from a detailed maintenance log, a seemingly innocuous document that, upon closer examination, revealed glaring discrepancies in the times when staff entered and exited the premises. This log stood in stark contrast to the family's assertions about Maribel's whereabouts, suggesting that the timeline they had presented was riddled with inconsistencies. The log not only questioned the family's version of events, but hinted at a deeper, more systemic issue of accountability and oversight within the household. As these pieces of evidence began to accumulate, it became increasingly clear that the investigation had unearthed a myriad of underlying problems, challenging the very foundations of the case against Maribel. The hearings, once a forum for villainizing the accused, had morphed into a compelling exploration of what happens when societal biases go unchecked, and how truth, once obscured, has the power to break through even the most entrenched narratives. As the layers of bias peeled away, it became apparent that the true culprit might never be uncovered. What was undeniable, however, was that Maribel had been sacrificed on the altar of prejudice. The Commission's final report was a damning indictment of a society too eager to let fear and discrimination override the principles of justice. In a carefully worded conclusion, the report stated that the mishandling of the investigation not only blemished the reputation of those involved, but also served as a stark reminder of the challenges that lay ahead in the fight for equality. In a dramatic turn of events, the court exonerated Maribel of all charges. The day of the verdict was met with both relief and anger. Relatives, friends, and supporters flooded the courthouse, their voices resonating in unison as they demanded not only justice for Maribel, but accountability from the powers that had endangered her dignity. The courtroom, once cold and imposing, became a stage upon which the public's collective conscience was laid bare, a reminder that the scales of justice must be constantly rebalanced to reflect truth and honor. Maribel emerged from the courthouse a changed woman. Though she had been scarred by the tribulations of accusation and the harsh judgment of both strangers and those she once trusted, there was a newfound light in her eyes. She had borne witness to the worst depths of human prejudice, but had also seen the potential for cleansing reform. With Elizabeth Monroe's steadfast support, Maribel began to participate in community outreach programs, speaking at local schools and community centers about the importance of integrity and vigilance against discrimination. Her story, once used to demonize a hardworking woman of color, had become a catalyst for broader social change. Through town hall meetings and public forums, citizens from all walks of life engaged in discussions about the roots of systemic inequities. Activists organized peaceful protests, and academic institutions invited expert speakers to examine the intersection of race, class, and justice. Slowly but surely, Maribel's experience helped to awaken a dormant collective resolve to confront the realities of bias that had long simmered beneath the veneer of progress. As the months passed, new policies were forged in the crucible of public opinion and guided by the principles of equity and accountability. The judiciary, motivated by the painful lessons learned from Maribel's ordeal, instituted comprehensive reforms aimed at ensuring that future investigations would be insulated from prejudice. Community leaders, emboldened by the success of the judicial review, worked tirelessly to bridge the divides between different social strata. In myriad small ways, from revised hiring practices in households to public campaigns celebrating cultural diversity, Maribel's legacy lived on. In the quiet twilight of her modest apartment, Maribel frequently reflected on the path that had brought her here, a path lined with hardship, regret, and reproach, yet illuminated by unexpected grace. She remembered the loyal eyes of a young girl who had once admired her gentle ways, the supportive words from a coworker who had fought her own battles against prejudice, and the kindness of a stranger in the long-forgotten corners of the city. Each memory was a thread in the tapestry of her life, now gleaming with hues of resilience and redemption. In the quiet twilight of her modest apartment, Maribel frequently reflected on the path that had brought her here, a path lined with hardship, regret, and reproach, yet also illuminated by moments of unexpected grace. She remembered the loyal eyes of a young girl who had once admired her gentle ways, the supportive words from a coworker who had fought her own battles against prejudice, and the subtle kindness of a stranger in the long-forgotten corners of the city. Each memory was a thread in the tapestry of her life, a tapestry that now gleamed with the hues of resilience and redemption. On a particularly cool autumn evening, as the first leaves began to drift from their branches, Maribel decided it was time to share her full story with those willing to listen. Invited to speak at a community celebration dedicated to human rights, she took the stage before a diverse audience that reflected the spectrum of modern society. In a voice that resonated with both sorrow and strength, she recounted the painful days of unfounded allegations and the subsequent battle for dignity and truth. I stand before you not as a criminal or an outcast, but as a human being who has lived a life of quiet service and quiet suffering, she intoned, her words measured and clear. Every day I witnessed how prejudice hides behind assumed innocence, and how those in power can twist truth to suit their convenience. Yet I also saw the faces of hope, the warmth of solidarity, and the undeniable truth that justice must prevail over injustice. With a steady breath, she continued, in those moments of darkness, I found strength not only within myself, but in the hands of others who dared to speak out against the tide of ignorance. We gathered in secret, voices raised in prayer and song, united by a shared dream of equality. Together, we crafted plans on the backs of discarded envelopes, reminded that even the most fragile mediums can carry the weight of our aspirations. On countless occasions, she reflected, I stood shoulder to shoulder with individuals from diverse backgrounds, each of us a thread woven together in a tapestry of resilience. Their stories are etched in my memory, reminding me that the fight for justice is not a solitary one, but a collective journey. From the elderly gentleman who marched tirelessly despite his frail frame, to the young activists armed with nothing but fiery passion, I drew inspiration from their unwavering commitment. But this journey has not been without sacrifice. There were nights when fear crept in, whispering doubts that threatened to undo our resolve. I recall one particular evening when we received a warning, a chilling message meant to discourage us, a tactic designed to quell the flames of rebellion. Yet instead of cowering, we converted our fear into fuel, igniting our determination to pursue the truth with renewed vigor. So here I stand today, not merely to recount the burdens of my past, but to light a beacon for the future. In each of us lies the potential to be an agent of change. We must refuse to be complacent, to let silence be our only answer. Our world demands that we rise, to amplify the voices that have been silenced for too long, and to challenge the very systems that propagate injustice. I urge you to join me in a movement towards understanding and compassion. Let us dismantle the barriers of prejudice, brick by brick, and forge bridges that connect rather than divide. For unity is our greatest weapon, and together we possess the power to rewrite this narrative, transforming fear into hope and injustice into an enduring promise of equality for all. The audience was rapt. In every face, Maribel saw a reflection of their own struggles, a shared recognition that the wounds of discrimination, though deep, could heal through compassion and systemic reform. In her plea for empathy and collective action, Maribel did not seek pity, but rather an acknowledgement of the interconnectedness of all people, regardless of the color of their skin or the class into which they were born. As the evening wound down and the soft glow of streetlights filled the square, conversations erupted among the listeners. Young activists, community organizers, and even skeptical bystanders began to form a loose but determined network of individuals resolved to advocate for justice in all its forms. Maribel's verdict had not only cleared her name, it had sparked a conversation that rippled outward like a stone cast upon a tranquil pond. In the aftermath of her public testimony, the judicial reforms became a permanent part of the city's governance, ensuring more thorough background checks, transparency in household employment, and greater accountability on the part of employers. A new cultural awareness began to take shape, a movement galvanized by the conviction that every person, regardless of race or class, deserved to be treated with dignity, respect, and the presumption of innocence. Maribel's personal evolution was echoed in the lives of many. Formerly silenced domestic workers found avenues to share their experiences, and grassroots organizations flourished to protect the rights of those who had long been marginalized. The scandal that had once threatened to define Maribel's life instead became a symbol of the possibility for overcoming systemic injustice through the power of truth and solidarity. As time flowed on, like a gentle stream, carving its path through hardened terrain, a sense of renewal settled over the community. The echoes of past injustices, though not completely silenced, were met with steadfast voices calling for accountability and reform. Maribel's journey, marked by trials and ultimate vindication, resonated in community centers, legal forums, and even in the classrooms where children learned about civil rights and the moral imperative of equality. The story of Maribel Santos stood as a testament to the resilience of the human spirit in the face of overwhelming odds. Her narrative embraced every facet of life, from the crushing weight of discrimination to the liberating light of justice. In recounting her tale, the omniscient narrator made it clear that every injustice, no matter how small, was a thread in the larger fabric of systemic inequity. Only by acknowledging and addressing these threads could society mend the tapestry of humanity. It was in this spirit of unity and understanding that the final chapters of Maribel's Odyssey were written. In a symbolic ceremony attended by community leaders, activists, legal professionals, and ordinary citizens, Maribel was honored for her courage in speaking out against injustice. The event was held in a modest community hall, draped with banners proclaiming messages of hope, equality, and the undying pursuit of truth. As applause filled the room and tearful faces turned toward her, Maribel embraced a future where every individual's struggle was recognized as integral to the collective cause of justice. "The law must protect every person," Maribel said softly during her acceptance speech, her voice heavy with empathy and resolve. "No matter our background, our skin color, or our economic standing, we all deserve to live in a world where justice shines as brightly as the morning sun. Let my story be a reminder that true equality is achieved not through silence, but through the courageous act of speaking our truth." In the days that followed, inspired by Maribel's endurance and Elizabeth Monroe's unwavering commitment to fairness, changes took root in institutions extending beyond the courtroom. Local government policies were reassessed to ensure a fairer distribution of resources, while social enterprises began supporting programs that trained domestic workers in their legal rights and self-advocacy. Maribel's humble act of recounting her life became a spark that ignited further reforms, a series of small revolutions that, together, promised a future where the chains of discrimination would finally be broken. The modern world, with all its shimmering advancements and technological marvels, now faced the timeless challenge of confronting human prejudice. Yet with every brave voice like Maribel's and every diligent advocate like Elizabeth working in unison, hope became a tangible force. It was a hope that proclaimed that every human being was entitled to dignity, every life was worth preserving, and every injustice, no matter how deeply hidden, must eventually give way to the light of truth. As dusk once again fell upon the city, Maribel paused as she walked along a quiet street lined with budding trees and modest homes. In the cool air of the night, she felt a gentle reassurance, not of a perfect world, but of a world that had taken a small, yet significant, step towards justice and equality. Every step she took was emblematic of the journeys of millions who had struggled, resisted, and ultimately triumphed against the forces of exclusion and bigotry. The story of Maribel Santos, once tarnished by the shadows of false accusations and societal prejudice, now served as an enduring reminder that justice is not a privilege reserved for the elite, but a right that belongs to every human soul. In the end, as the omniscient narrator declared, the march toward equality is ceaseless. It is built upon the sacrifices of those who dare to stand up against the powerful tides of discrimination. And so, amid the twinkling lights of a city that had learned to listen, Maribel walked on. Each step a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. Each heartbeat a promise that one day, the injustices born of racism and class divisions would be relegated to the annals of a painful past. Her life shone as a beacon of hope, calling on every individual, every community, and every institution to seek the truth and to shield it with courage. In the quiet cadence of history, where victory and defeat intertwine like the brushstrokes on a vast canvas, the final message rang clear. True justice inevitably emerges when society refuses to tolerate inequity. Equality is the birthright of every person, regardless of the color of their skin or the circumstances of their birth. Likewise, the case of Maribel Santos remains a vivid reminder that the light of truth can dissolve even the thickest shadows of prejudice. As the city continued to evolve, embracing its newfound commitment to equity, Maribel's legacy was woven into its cultural fabric. In schools, in meeting halls, and in everyday conversations, her story encouraged people to look beyond superficial differences and to cherish the common bonds of humanity. With each retelling, the narrative not only condemned the inverted logic of racism and class bias, but also celebrated the redemptive power of justice. In the end, as the sun rose over the city with a promise of another day filled with hope and the possibility of redemption, the legacy of Maribel Santos shone as an eternal beacon, a call to hold fast to the belief that someday her story and the stories of countless others marginalized by a biased system would not only serve as a record of past injustices, but also lay the groundwork for a future defined by true equality and unyielding justice. In the end, as the sun rose over the city with a promise of another day filled with hope and the possibility of redemption, the legacy of Maribel Santos shone as an eternal beacon, a call to hold fast to the belief that one day her story and the stories of countless others marginalized by a biased system will serve not only as a record of past injustice, but also as a foundation for a future defined by true equality and unyielding justice. As the sun's rays filtered through the buildings, casting warm light on the bustling streets below, communities began to stir, each individual carrying with them the weight of their own narratives. Among them was a young activist named Javier, inspired by Maribel's unwavering spirit. He had taken it upon himself to continue her work, organizing workshops that educated neighbors on their rights and the power of collective action. With each gathering, stories of resilience blossomed, igniting a rejuvenation of hope within the heart of the city. Maribel's influence extended far beyond the boundaries of her original fight. It sparked a movement that transcended generations, inviting voices from all corners of society to rise and reclaim their narratives. Schools began incorporating her story into their curriculums, teaching students about the importance of advocacy and the impact of social justice. In coffee shops and community centers, discussions flowed about systemic change and how the reverberations of Maribel's legacy could trigger transformation. Meanwhile, local artists took to murals and public art, creating vibrant displays that portrayed heroes of the past alongside present-day changemakers, ensuring that the scars of history were not forgotten, but rather transformed into a canvas of hope and unity. These creative expressions drew more attention to the ongoing struggles faced by marginalized communities, fostering empathy and understanding among those who may have previously turned a blind eye. As the days turned into weeks, the annual gathering known as Maribel's Day was established, a day dedicated to honoring her contribution and celebrating the collective strides made toward justice. It became a time for reflection, storytelling, and envisioning a future where inequities would be addressed not just in the streets, but within the hearts and minds of every citizen. It was a reminder of how far they had come, and yet how much further there was still to go. Amid the celebrations, Javier stood on the stage, looking out at the crowd that had gathered, a tapestry of cultures and backgrounds woven together by a shared dream of equality. In that moment, he felt a deep sense of responsibility but also immense hope. The legacy of Maribel Santos had transformed from a solitary story into a powerful movement, one that would echo through the city and beyond, ensuring that the pursuit of justice remained alive in the hearts of many for generations to come. With every rallying cry, every mural painted, and every voice raised in solidarity, the promise of a future unshackled from the chains of prejudice and discrimination became increasingly tangible. The journey was far from over, but as long as her story burned brightly within them, they would tirelessly strive toward crafting a world rooted in compassion, understanding, and unyielding justice, one meaningful step at a time.